Thought that Rome fed its people out of generosity, that free grain was compassion, that public games were entertainment, that emperors cared about the poor. But that story is comforting and completely wrong, because bread and circuses were not kindness, they were control. As Rome grew, so did its population. By the 1st century, the city was bursting at the seams. More than 1 million people crowded into Rome. Most owned no land. Most had no stable work. Most depended on the state to survive. This wasn't prosperity. It was volatility. An urban population that large is powerful and dangerous. Hungry crowds don't debate policy. They riot. Rome learned this the hard way. Food shortages led to unrest. Unrest led to violence. Violence threatened the state itself. So Rome made a choice, not to fix the economy, but to manage the crowd. The grain dole began as a limited program, cheap grain for citizens in need. But over time, it expanded. More recipients, lower prices, eventually free. By the late Republic, hundreds of thousands received grain at no cost, not because Rome could afford it, but because Rome couldn't afford not to. Free grain was not about feeding people, it was about keeping them quiet. A hungry crowd is unpredictable. A fed crowd is manageable. And Rome went further. Food alone wasn't enough. The masses needed distraction, emotion, spectacle. So Rome gave them circuses, gladiatorial games, chariot races, public executions, festivals that lasted for days. All free, all state-sponsored, all carefully timed. Bread kept people alive. Circuses kept them occupied. Together, they did something remarkable. They replaced political participation with consumption. Citizens no longer demanded reform, they demanded delivery. More grain, bigger games, bloodier spectacle. Rome didn't ask what people wanted, it taught them what to expect. This system changed the relationship between the state and its people. Citizens became dependents. Politics became performance. Power became theater. And the cost was enormous. Grain had to come from somewhere. Egypt, North Africa, distant provinces. Entire regions were reorganized around feeding Rome. Ships sailed constantly. Ports expanded. Warehouses multiplied. A single disruption could trigger panic. So Rome militarized food supply, protected shipments, controlled production, punished hoarding. Feeding Rome became a national security issue. The state now existed to sustain the capital, not the empire. And the costs kept rising. More people qualified. More grain was needed. More taxes were required. But taxes couldn't rise too much, because the same population being fed could also revolt. So Rome borrowed, debased currency, seized land, redirected provincial wealth. Bread and circuses didn't solve Rome's problems. They postponed them, at compound interest. And here's the hidden truth. This system made reform impossible. Once people depend on the state to survive, you can't take it away. Any attempt to reduce grain distributions sparked unrest. Any cut to games provoked fury. Emperors learned quickly. You could lose wars, you could lose provinces, but you could not touch the grain. This trapped Rome in a permanent spending cycle. The population grew dependent. The state grew brittle. Politics became a bidding war. Who could promise more food? Who could stage bigger games? Competence mattered less than spectacle. The Republic couldn't survive this, and the Empire exploited it. Emperors understood crowd psychology better than senators ever had. They didn't rule through debate, they ruled through supply chains and entertainment. As long as the grain ships arrived and the games continued, the people didn't care who ruled them. This is why bread and circuses are so dangerous. They don't just pacify people, they hollow out citizenship. Rome didn't fall because the people were lazy. It fell because the system trained them to trade freedom for stability. Over time, the costs became unbearable. Grain distributions expanded even as productivity declined. Games grew more extravagant as the treasury shrank. Rome responded the only way it knew how: more control, more extraction, more pressure on the provinces, which weakened the empire further. By the time Rome faced external threats, it was already trapped internally. A city too large to feed, a population too dependent to reform, a state too indebted to adapt. Bled and circuses didn't cause Rome's collapse alone, but they made collapse inevitable. Because a system built on permanent appeasement cannot survive scarcity, and when scarcity finally arrived, the illusion shattered. The crowds didn't rise to defend Rome, they waited to be fed. This is the final irony. Rome spent centuries buying peace at home, and when the bill came due, there was nothing left to pay with. Bled and circuses were never generosity. They were anesthesia. They numbed Rome while the disease spread. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, and Rome's lesson is brutally clear. When a state replaces responsibility with dependency and citizenship with spectacle, collapse doesn't come with fire and invasion. It comes with empty granaries and silent arenas.